Four more ranked on ranked showdowns headlined week 5 here on the Phil Steele Show. Kyle Schassburger, Phil Steele, and Tripp Hurd, the lock doctor himself. Follow Phil on Twitter at PhilSteele042. We got roughly 34 games that we're going to try to get through over the next hour. Appreciate you listening to us for the OG podcast listeners on College Sports Now. Of course, you get Phil's weekly hit with Stephen Hartzell and Wayne Cook if you want to scroll back one more episode. But two, the video audience has been percolating. It's been popping on the Varsity channel on YouTube. And for those of you that are watching the show this week, you'll see permanently inscribed on your screen at the bottom a special offer from Phil this week. So I want to make sure we lead off. We'll hit this a couple of times. But if you need a reminder, just look at the bottom of the screen. Go to YouTube, Varsity channel, the Phil Steele Show, Week 5 edition, Phil. You're coming in with your hair on fire with a big-time guarantee this week.
That's right. Last week I had 3 plays. One was Cincinnati, a super easy winner. And then I had Georgia Tech and Louisiana. And generally when you give up one defensive or special teams touchdown, you're going to lose a game. Both those games we gave up 2 defensive special teams touchdowns. Somehow Georgia Tech, despite a 100-yard edge, lost. Anyway, luck like that can't happen a second straight week. So I put my best plays in inside the press box, but I also like to put out quality plays here. What could have easily been a 3-0 week turned out to be 1-2. So I'm going to guarantee this week 3 plays at the end of it. I'll give them to you. And if they don't win, at least we'll go at least 2-1 this week. You get my NFL press box, which went 2-1 last week, absolutely free at $20 value. So I know the luck was going to change. 2 defensive touchdowns in 2 games last week. We're going with the guarantee this week.
I love it, Phil. The guarantee with his power play. Stay tuned at the end of the show for those 3 picks. Phil's favorites here for week 5 in college football. And if you're not over 500, if you don't get that 2-1 week at least minimum, hell, you might go a perfect 3-0. But if you're below 500, if you're 1 or 2 or worse, taking Phil's advice on his 3 power plays, he's going to guarantee you that $20 value. Give you for free the NFL Inside the Press Box this weekend for what? Week 4 now of the NFL season coming up on Sunday. The code, okay, will be PS Show. PS Show. Again, it's scrolling across the bottom of your screen currently, but that's if you don't have an over 500 week utilizing Phil's power play. So we'll get to that at the end of the show, maybe a couple of sick picks on the way out. We might figure out who the bottom feeder of all of FBS college football is after this weekend. So let's start with Thursday night, though, Phil. This is the last Thursday night until Halloween night, okay, where there's only one football game on Thursday in college football. So starting next week, we're going to have multiple up until Halloween night. And hell, the Fun Belt and action will be here before we know it on Tuesday and Wednesdays. First meeting as conference foes. It's Army as a 13.5-point favorite, 45.5 is the total at Temple, 7:30 on ESPN. Army facing the Owls for a 3rd consecutive game, winning against FAU and then Rice. And now they get Temple. It's in Philly, a place they're all familiar with because of the Army-Navy game, which is played there semi-regularly, if you will. Temple lost to Navy 38-11. That doesn't bode well against another option-based offense, though, Phil. But Temple's looked a little bit better since making a change at quarterback.
Yeah, definitely. And Evan Simon at the quarterback spot hitting 65% with a 7-1 ratio. That's solid. I also like the fact that Temple's defense plays well against the option. Now, granted, they lost to Navy earlier this year, but Navy didn't exactly overwhelm them. There's a couple of big plays. In fact, they had an 18-17 first down edge in that game. They also played an option team in Coastal Carolina. So they're well-versed in the option. Generally, the tough part of playing the option is you don't practice against it. Well, guess what? They've had a bye, or they've in 2 of the last 3 games, they have practiced against the option. They've done well against the option in the past, even beat Navy last year. So I really like that. I like the fact that Evan Simon at the quarterback spot, and they're getting 13.5 at home. I like Temple plus the points in this one.
It's a great play on Temple last week, Phil. You called that one with their upset over Utah State. Moving on to Friday night, weather could be a big factor in Miami when Hurricanes welcome Virginia Tech to town. Miami laying a big number at home. It's 19 and a half is what I'm seeing right now. And while they've been on cruise control thus far, this should be a step up in competition. I know Virginia Tech enters this one at 2-2. Only one cover all season, but still an experienced group here. It's the first conference game for the Hokies. As bad as a start as this has been, they still have their goal of trying to get to Charlotte. It's still ahead of them. It's still achievable, but plenty to play for here. Friday night games already tend to get weird. Now you've got this storm. Hopefully it's going to miss. Hopefully, it's not as bad as they think it's going to be, but could be a factor here Friday night.
Yeah, and this is a game where I probably have no real interest in it because, Miami has played much better this year. They've been dominant in every game. Although the South Florida game, that thing was really close at the half. They got that touchdown right before the half, which I think really turned the game. They only had a 222-yard edge at the half. VT has been unimpressive in all their games this year. But coming into the year, I only had Miami about a 10-point favorite. The weather could be a factor. So I don't have any interest. I'm going to let you guys. Would either of you two feel strongly on this game?
I think there's some fishy here with that line being that big. Virginia Tech was my preseason ACC favorite. That hasn't boded well at all, but I think they're better than what their record has shown. Rutgers and Vanderbilt are better than what we thought coming into the year, who they both have suffered losses to. I think 19.5 is almost as egregious as what Illinois is facing as a dog on the road at Penn State, and we'll get to that one. I'm all over Virginia Tech here. Hell, I might flirt with the under at 54.5 just because of the weather, too, and I think the defense from Virginia Tech is going to rise to the challenge against Cam Ward and this Miami team. Cam Ward is your Heisman favorite right now from an odds perspective. Plus 450 is it for Cam Ward? So I think this is going to be a much tougher test. Tripp, what do you think?
I don't hate where you're going here, but I'm kind of on the fence right now. Is Virginia Tech just off to a slow start, or are they about to become one of those teams we end up just kind of picking against all season?
Yeah. Are they a fraud?
Yeah.
Or can they turn this thing around? I believe in Brent Pry, man. Come on, your boy Tripp. You got so much history with Brent Pry. How are you going to go against your bathroom mate from ACC kickoff 2 years ago? You nearly blew the doors off with a sneeze. Washington and Rutgers, Phil. I heard you say with Wayno and Hartzell earlier this week, this is one of your favorite plays before the season even began. But have the winds changed with Washington going on the road at Rutgers, who's a 2.5-point favorite in Piscataway. 44.5 is the total. 8 o'clock on Fox. Third meeting, first as Big Ten foes. Washington played in Piscataway on a Friday night, week 1 of 2017. Huskies pulled away as 7-point favorites, 30-14. UW going cross country after shutting down Northwestern 24-5 on short rest. Rutgers held off Virginia Tech with a late field goal, 26-23. It's a blackout game, Phil. Greg Schiano, this seems like a legacy game for him at home. They're 3-0 for a fourth consecutive season. Haven't been 4-0 since 2012.
Yeah, and this is a game like I mentioned with Stephen and Wayne on Tuesday that, prior to the season, I was anticipating Rutgers maybe being off a loss at Virginia Tech. Washington coming in 4-0, undefeated, and being a solid home underdog. And it's a long trip for Washington. You have a veteran, experienced Rutgers team against an inexperienced Washington team making his first road trip. Loved Rutgers +6, +7. Now they're -2.5, but I still like Rutgers in this one. They are the more veteran team. Kyle Monangai at the running back spot, one of the best running backs in the country. And I really like what Ethan Kelly-McManus is doing. Last week, VT tried to take away the run, forced Rutgers to pass a little bit, and Rutgers overcame the odds. In fact, they led that game by 16 points in the fourth quarter. VT put together a couple of touchdowns and 2-point conversions to tie, had all the momentum in the world, and yet Rutgers was able to drive down and get a field goal. It's a much different atmosphere here. They're at home. You mentioned blackout. Washington, first road game. That means first road start for a young offensive line. I definitely like Rutgers in this one, minus the 2.5. I think that's cheap. I'll take the Knights to win this one by a touchdown or more.
I think Fox is really onto something with this Friday night game all of a sudden. I feel like we dogged it, in years past. It's taken away from high school football. I do understand all of that. Nebraska has come out saying no Friday night games for us, except the times that we host Iowa on Black Friday. That's the only Friday game we want. I understand that. But from a viewing perspective as a college football fan, hell yeah, let me go home Friday night. Even though Arizona and Kansas State underwhelmed 2 weeks ago, Illinois, Nebraska last week, yes, you got Brando on the call. Take it or leave it, whatever. I think the pomp and circumstance of Friday night on Fox, that is a television viewing phenomena that's like a sleeping giant that we are slowly awakening in this college football space. Reminder, you can listen to both games on the Varsity Network app, out-of-market games from Learfield, live college sports. Download the free Varsity Network app, available for both Apple and Android. Listen to college sports live with the Varsity Network app. Tripp?
Sticking up for these Friday games, man. You should be ashamed of yourself. Let's jump to Saturday, where college football is supposed to be played. A couple of Big 12 teams looking to get right on Saturday. Oklahoma State and Kansas State will meet in Manhattan. Both these teams coming off losses. Last week, Kansas State was actually leading 6-3 about 2 minutes before halftime, and just all hell broke loose against BYU. They scored 14 before they ever got to halftime. Avery Johnson comes out, throws another pick right in at the start of the third quarter. So the game just kind of got out of hand at this point. But you got two teams. They both really need this game. Both will be motivated. Do you like one side or the other here to get back on track?
And don't forget about the bobbled punt return, 90 yards for a touchdown by BYU. It was a remarkable 6 minutes for BYU in that game. Kansas State had a 367, 241-yard edge, and yet you look on the scoreboard, it was a blowout loss. And Oklahoma State probably a little on the opposite side of that. Oklahoma State trailed Utah. It wasn't even a game. It was 22-3 late in the fourth quarter. And then Oklahoma State put together 2 drives for touchdowns, which made the final score respectable. They did have a chance to recover in the onside kick, but Utah recovered it, and Kyle Whittingham said it didn't need to be that close, and it probably wouldn't have been. Even with those 2 long drives, they were still out first down 20-11 with a 456, 285-yard deficit. So I think last year I liked Oklahoma State, called for the upset in it, and they were a double-digit dog, and it really was the game that turned their season around. But this is a series dominated by the home team. I'm going to go with Kansas State to be the team to rebound this week, and the number's about 5.5, as you mentioned. So I like K-State minus the points there.
Let's go to Oxford. Kentucky is visiting Ole Miss. This is a 12 o'clock start on ABC. Start of the season officially for the Rebels, who haven't played anyone. Sorry, Wake Forest. But Ole Miss, 17.5-point favorites. 53 is the total, hosting the Wildcats, who were ranked 7th nationally, Phil, back in 2022. When they came to Oxford at 4-0, they were 6-point dogs. Homecoming for the Rebs, they've won 3 consecutive SEC home openers, 12 of 14. Overall in Southeastern Conference play, 6-7-1 against the spread. So pretty much a coin flip in those SEC contests. 423 passing yards per game, ranks first nationally, 55 points per game. Also tops in the country, 12th in rushing, number 1 in scoring defense. Lane Kiffin wasn't high on the schedule previously laid out before him, but they aced the test. He's leading on training camp, fall camp, and practice in terms of getting them ready for this moment. Phil, are they ready to cover the big number, though, in 17.5 at home against Kentucky?
Yeah, coming into the season, a little concerned about Mississippi's lack of contact during the spring and during the fall. But now, as you mentioned, they got 4 games under their belt, so they're fine. They're at home. You've got a potent offense that can run the football and throw it well. What we're really like in this game is the Ole Miss defense. They actually have a really good defensive front 7, 12 sacks this year, taking away the run, allowing just 35 yards per game. Yes, they're taking on their best opponent year to date, but we saw Kentucky struggle with South Carolina, and that was at home. This is Kentucky's first road game. So now they're going on the road. That offensive line got overwhelmed by South Carolina at home. I think Ole Miss's front 7 could do much of the same here. And Lane Kiffin's going to be trying to score, whether it's third quarter, fourth quarter. So even though you're laying a bunch of points here, I still feel pretty confident. Ole Miss, one of the best teams in the country. I like the Rebels to win this one by more than the 17.5.
Dave Aranda and the Bears really botched one they should have had in Boulder, allowing Colorado's incredible Hail Mary come back and win. You wonder how Baylor will respond now with the head coach's seat becoming even more warmer, Phil. This one is kicking off at 12 on ESPN. Baylor hosting number 22 BYU. We chronicled the Cougars' massive blowout in odd fashion over Kansas State already. Baylor is favored by 3 at home. 45.5 is the total. Big 12 home opener for Baylor. They're 1-8 straight up and 3-6 against the spread in their last 9 conference games played in Waco. That's straight out of the magazine, the Phil Steele College Football Preview. It's only week 5, folks. Get out to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or go to philsteele.com. Get that magazine now, hard copy or digital edition. Phil, only one of your 9 sets of power rankings, I found this interesting, in the bag, called for BYU making a bowl this season. They're just 2 wins away already with an open date looming after scoring in all 3 phases in that rout of K-State.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with BYU each and every week this year. And as mentioned, maybe a little fortunate against Kansas State last week. But, they beat SMU on the road, dominated Wyoming, and played well against Southern Illinois. There's a reason they're 4-0 against the spread. But I tell you what, that Baylor game last week, not only the Hail Mary pass, but keep in mind, just a few minutes prior, they're kicking the game-clinching field goal to go up by 10, and they miss it. And then in overtime, when they're going to tie it, going in the end zone for the tying touchdown, fumble into the end zone, touchback. Amazing game to lose last week. It was a tough lot. My computer had Baylor as a best bet and one of the tougher losses I've seen. I think they do bounce back at home. I think BYU's off a game which was misleading. Got outgained, got out first down in the game. Baylor used to have a really good home record. Last year it turned sour. I think they start to return to that form and should have beat Colorado on the road last week. Their other losses at Utah, that's not a bad loss. They really dominated Air Force in their last home game. I like Baylor minus the points in this one.
Let's talk about Western Kentucky. I've mentioned this before. Western Kentucky has some really clean-looking uniforms. Been very impressed with how they've looked this week. Last week, they had very quietly a really good win over a Toledo team up in Bowling Green. They trailed 21-7, came back to win 26-21. Veltkamp stepped in at quarterback. He's a homegrown product. He's from Bowling Green. I think he threw for 1 touchdown, ran for 2 more, and the defense for the Hilltoppers stepped up with 2 very timely picks late in that game. And this week, they're on the road at Boston College, noon kick. BC favored by 12.5 on Saturday. They had to come from behind last week to beat Michigan State in the red bandana game. But, Castellanos at quarterback, Trayshawn Ward, Lewis Bond, they've given that offense a punch this year. Who do we like here? It's a big spread at 12.5, 13 is what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good situation for Western Kentucky. You take a look at Boston College, massive game at Missouri, played really well, came up short. Then at home, red bandana game against Michigan State. Still question a little bit the 4th and goal call, whereas if they punch in a touchdown, they probably cover that game. Doggone it. And then next week, they've got Virginia on the road, their conference opener. Or second conference game, but a big conference game on the road. And you're only playing Western Kentucky this week. So of those 4 weeks, this is clearly their least important game. And Western impressed me 2 weeks ago. I remember the Middle Tennessee State game. Finley was out. Veltkamp came in, and he has been just dynamite since he's taken over. He's hitting 80% of his passes with a 5-0 ratio. I think that Western's a solid team, getting a lot of points here. I'm going to take Western plus the points. And I get the feeling you like Western here as well, right, Tripp?
I do a little bit, yeah. I think that's just too big a number for me. So
I like
be
the
on
under.
The tops
I like
weekend.
the under in that one, 54.5.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's jump over to the ACC. Well, one ACC team. We've got Northern Illinois on the road at NC State. What a difference a week makes for Northern Illinois. They entered last week as a 2-touchdown favorite at home against Buffalo. I think we all liked the Huskies here last week as well, and they ended up getting they got beat in overtime by the Bulls, so they lost their ranking. Who knows? They may have lost their chances to do something big down the road. But this week they're heading to take on their old coach, Dave Doran, in Raleigh. Things didn't go any better for the Wolfpack last week. If you saw their game against Clemson, the Tigers just had those guys in a sleeper hold for the entire game. NC State is starting to three quarters. Yeah, that's right. They
until the walk-ons
almost had a chance at a backdoor cover there for NC State. But the Wolfpack feels like another one of those teams we might be betting against a lot this year. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, in the Northern Illinois game against Buffalo, I mean, they led 14-3 at the half, total domination. They missed a field goal. They could have been up 17-3. I'm like, I hope that doesn't come back to bite us. And then Buffalo had a play where a quarterback in midfield throws the ball in the end zone. There's 2 Northern Illinois defenders there. There's a Buffalo guy. The 3 of them all go up for the ball. The Buffalo guy gets a touchdown. Buffalo had 9 first downs last week. Even with that 50-yard pass, they had 184 yards. Northern Illinois had 24 first downs last week, 359 yards. It was just a game where this play kept Buffalo in the game, and it came to bite them in overtime, where they ended up losing that game 23-20. So I was still impressed with Northern Illinois. They were the much better team, especially statistically. It's just these plays just went against them last week. And with NC State, we're talking 59-14 in the fourth quarter. NC State, as Kyle threw out there, playing against walk-ons, puts up 21 points and 214 yards in the fourth quarter. Now, I really had this one circled because I like Northern Illinois plus about 14. That's where they play their best. Numbers actually under a touchdown. NC State's desperate for a win. I still think Northern Illinois is a better team here. So I'm going to take Northern plus the points. I was hoping to be getting over a touchdown, though.
I just can't go back to the Husky well ever again. And you took care of Western Illinois earlier this season, and then you beat Notre Dame. I mean, and now you lose to Buffalo when I take you and I get on your side as 2 touchdown favorites. I mean, what a letdown spot. I mean, just screwing the pooch here. Let's move to Navy at UAB. The Middies and Brian Newberry beat Memphis 56-44. Talk about letdown, Tripp. Memphis goes to Tallahassee, and then they get ran over again and again and again by Navy this past week.
Phil called it.
Yeah, he did. He was on it. How about this for Navy? 143 points in their 3-0 start, more than they scored over 7 games all of last season. 143 in a 3-0 start. They hadn't scored that in their first 7 last year. Navy has scored a TD on the first play of a drive an astounding 5 times this season, most in the FBS. Blake Horvath, 6 total TDs, 211 yards rushing, 4 scores against Tigers, most for a mid since Malcolm Perry against ECU in 2019. UAB's off the open date, looking to climb to 500. They had that valiant effort in Fayetteville a couple of weeks ago. First trip to the Iron City for Navy, Phil.
Yeah, and last week, as you mentioned, I like Navy because of the situation. They were off a bye. Memphis is off a win against Florida State. You thought, now you have to prepare for the option. That's a tough thing to do on a 1-week basis, especially when you're riding a high. And Navy almost blew that game. I mean, Memphis recovered the outside kick, had the ball down by 5, and I think they're at about the Navy 25 late in the game. I'm like, I think Navy might lose this, and then the interception return for a touchdown, and they end up winning it by 12. And with UAB, I like the way they played against Arkansas 2 weeks ago. They actually led that thing early. Arkansas was pretty good team, and they played them even up. Now they had a bye last week, which is helpful when you're playing the option. You get to work against the option for 2 full weeks in defense, which is what UAB's doing here. And if you look at Navy, they're off the big win over Memphis, a ranked Memphis team. Guess who's on deck? Air Force. That's one of the biggest games of the season. Is this game that important? Not as much. I think it's a flat spot for them, a sandwich game, off a massive win with Air Force on deck. I'm actually liking UAB plus the points at home.
Should be a good game at Yulman Stadium Saturday. Tulane hosting South Florida. Both teams 2-2, and both of their losses each coming to Power 4 teams. High total here in this one, 64.5. Tulane's a 5-point favorite at home. The Bulls play with a lot of tempo. They can really run the ball, even with their quarterback, Byron Brown. Top 10 in explosive running plays coming into this week. And on the other hand, Darian Mensah, he's a big play waiting to happen. It might be good. It might be bad for Tulane. So far, we don't really know. But I think a lot of points here, even though it's 64.5, pretty high total. I could see a lot of points in this one. You have an angle here, Phil?
Yeah, and you got to like Mekhi Hughes, the running back for Tulane, who's got over 400 yards already running, and then Byron Brown at South Florida. I like the way South Florida played against Bama and Miami. Tulane's at home, though. They're pretty tough at home. I personally had the line about Tulane minus anywhere from 4 to 7 points. That's where the spread is. So I don't have an interest in this game. Once again, I'll throw it out to you two. Do either of you two have a strong play in this game?
Over. I like the over.
There you go.
It's high, but I like the over.
All right, we got to play.
Yeah, I side with Tripp there. Tripp, why don't you take us to the Plains? I might have a play. We might come back to Ball State and JMU at the end of the show.
Okay, yeah. Oklahoma at Auburn, another noon kick. Sooners had some quarterback struggles last week against Tennessee. They ended up having to bring in the backup, Michael Hawkins Jr. He may be their new starter this week. I'm not sure if they've confirmed that yet or not. He is, okay. But the Sooners heading to Auburn. Auburn also having some quarterback issues of their own with Peyton Thorne and Hank Brown. They lost last weekend to Arkansas. I mean, I think if there's a unit in this game that you like, it's got to be the Oklahoma defense. And pretty tight spread here, 1.5. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. Great assessment, Trip. Oklahoma's defense is the top unit in this game. We've seen that Jordan Hare, which is normally an extremely tough place to win at, both Arkansas and California have come in here via the turnover, but still solid wins in both cases. And I guess my only concern with Oklahoma would be a freshman quarterback, first road start, Jordan Hare. I worry about that a little bit, but I do think Oklahoma is a better team. I'm going to side with the Sooners. Not happy with their quarterback situation, but Auburn doesn't have a better quarterback. They may have zero quarterbacks because they thought they had found the solution in Hank Brown, and then he was replaced by Thorne last week. So I'm going to side with Oklahoma. Freshman quarterback on the road scares me a little, though.
Yeah, and how about Hugh Freeze throwing his quarterbacks under the bus
under the bus.
I wish we could find a guy who didn't throw it to the other team. My goodness. Let's move to the mid portion of the day, a little afternoon delight with a ranked on ranked matchup in South Bend. It's Louisville and Notre Dame. Fighting Irish are laying 46.5 is the total. 3:30 on Peacock. Fighting Irish ranked 16th. Cardinals are ranked 15th. Louisville still undefeated at 3-0, meeting as ranked opponents for the second consecutive seasons. Cards won over 10th ranked Irish 33-20 in the Derby City last year. Louisville beat Georgia Tech 31-19. ND won 28-3 over Miami. Hard to feel any better about the Irish after another underwhelming performance against an inferior opponent. Another home loss, Phil, I think would completely blow up the season. I understand it's a ranked team in Louisville, but you can't lose another home game. You already lost one in South Bend to NIU. And would dash their CFP hopes. I think it's interesting. Colin Lacey, the big USA transfer wideout that was obtained by Louisville in the offseason, still hasn't played. He might make his debut for Louisville after breaking his collarbone on the second scrimmage of fall camp. So we'll see. I think this one's low scoring, though, Phil. More like that game we had, during the COVID year? I think it was like 12-7. 46.5 is the total.
Yeah, it probably will be on the lower scoring side. You look at Louisville last week. And it was a play that I had Georgia Tech as mentioned, and Georgia Tech throws a lateral. He's trying to avoid pressure, and it goes into the end zone, and Louisville falls on it for a touchdown. Then later in the game, after Georgia Tech couldn't score on a 1st and goal, they later settled for a field goal and had the field goal blocked and returned for a touchdown. Somehow lost that game by 12.5 points with 2 defensive touchdowns by Louisville. Louisville, other than that, didn't have much offense. 14 first downs for the entire game, 326 yards. Georgia Tech hit 419, had the ball the entire second half, somehow didn't cover. I wasn't impressed with Louisville. The Jacksonville State, Austin Peay, I'm still waiting to see what kind of team they are. Now, Notre Dame last week, Miami, Ohio is a really good team. They're going to be contending for the MAC title. They actually had a 428 to 229 yard edge against Miami. No, they weren't that impressive, but it wasn't a game where you're going to be completely up for it. This one they will. Why? Revenge. And on philsteele.com, I've got a category on my schedule which has revenge on it. And the revenge category is something like 58-20 the last 2 years. You got legitimate revenge. You've got a solid defense, a low-scoring game, but I like the Irish by over a touchdown here.
I've talked a little bit today about teams we're going to be betting against a lot. I think Wisconsin might fall into that category here pretty soon. They're 0-3 against the spread this year, and I don't think they're in a very good spot on Saturday. They're traveling to Southern California to play USC, who's fresh off a loss at the Big House. Listening to Coach Riley, he thought his defense actually played pretty well outside of just a couple of plays where Michigan got loose, and that was kind of the difference in the game. It's a big number, USC favored by 15.5, but for me, I think USC is the play here.
To me, this one's a toss-up, so we're going to stick with Tripp's play on USC in this one. I go back to the Wisconsin game, and, I'm watching my 12 games, but I got an eye on each and every one of them, and when I'm watching the Wisconsin-Alabama game, I'm counting good plays, bad plays. It wasn't one of my main 4 games. It was up here somewhere, and I'm like, Wisconsin's about a 50-50 good plays, bad plays at the half, and then the second half was some big plays, and Alabama pulled away. So then I had to go back and watch that game, just it by itself. And sure enough, with about a minute and a half to go in the half, both Wisconsin and Alabama, the yards are equal. Wisconsin's the same, but they're down 14-3, and then they gave up that long touchdown right before the half, which is, of course, as I talked with Gil Brandt all the time in the past, he always said, that score right before the half. It's a momentum thing. And what happened is Alabama came out and won. So I don't think Wisconsin's as bad as the final score against Alabama would be my concern. But in the positive side for USC would be the fact that if Mullins doesn't break off that long run, I don't know if Michigan can go down the field and score. And as it was, they needed a fourth down conversion to do it. They probably beat Michigan on the road. And if that's the case, remember, Michigan only had 12 first downs in the game. If they beat Michigan on the road, we've got a completely different line and thought process on USC. So we're going to go with Tripp's USC play here. But I'm just saying Wisconsin's not as bad as you think.
Okay.
So Phil leaning with Tripp, not a strong play out of the gate, set a toss-up. He will have 3 strong plays, his power plays at the end of the show. And remember, Phil is guaranteeing a winning week here in Week 5 for the Phil Steele Show. It's the Phil Steele Show Guarantee. Must have a winning week on Phil's 3 plays, or you'll get his NFL Inside the Press Box, a $20 value free this weekend for Week 4 in the NFL. That code on the website, philsteele.com, is PS Show. You'll go to the store, you'll select the single issue NFL press box, type in that code, but that's if you don't have a winning week. So stay tuned for those power plays coming up in about 20 minutes or so. You'll see it scrolling across the bottom ticker. If you're watching on the Varsity channel, appreciate the YouTube audience who is with us each and every week, as well as that audience continues to grow. And of course, those listening on the podcast form and on Twitter at CS Now Tweets, wherever you are, at Phil Steele 042. You can follow Phil. He'll have his Phil Steele Plus tour that is available as well. You can check out for Week 5 in college football. Phil, the wild and weird always happens in Arlington between Arkansas and Texas A&M. It rears its head every time. It delivers. The Hogs have never been favored in this game in the last 14 years, since 2010. So it's always been the Aggies. The trend continues this weekend. 4 points is what the mighty Fighting Aggies are favored by over the Hogs. 52.5 is the total. 3:30 on ESPN. At Jerry's World in Arlington, they call it the Southwest Classic. Aggies have won 11 of 12 SEC meetings, including 34-22 last season. What's your play here, Phil? Do you have a lean? It's hard to – this is a coin flip type thing for me too. I mean, I want to side – I think Arkansas needs it more, given Sam Pittman and the future of this program, and it being just Mike Elko's first season. Both are 3-1, but – the postseason and bowl opportunities drastically decrease here if one of these teams were to lose.
Yeah, and I think you take a look at the rest of the schedule, Kyle. Texas A&M plays Missouri at home, at Mississippi State, at South Carolina, at Auburn. Those are winnable games. Arkansas is playing Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and they're playing at Missouri. Much tougher schedule coming up for Arkansas. And I just love Sam Pittman as a dog. I'll go back to last year once again and mention, and I think I brought it up on last week's when I had Arkansas over Auburn. You know, they were not a good team last year, and yet they went into Texas, or they played Texas A&M in Arlington. When at LSU, they only lost by 3. They played at Mississippi. They played at Alabama. Each of those games they covered as a large dog. They just play the big teams tight, and this is a game where they're going to be fired up for it. I really like Jaquindon Jackson, the Utah transfer, running back, 474 yards rushing, 9.5 yards per carry. Taylon Green, a bit of a big play one way or the other. He's going to make some head-scratching plays, which turn the ball over, but he also can make some big plays with his arm and his leg. I'm going to take Arkansas plus the points in this game.
A couple of Big 12 teams really in need of a win. TCU on the road at Kansas, 3:30 kick. TCU, they're off a bye after losing back-to-back games against UCF and SMU. And when TCU needs a win, it's normally a really good thing for them to get Kansas on their schedule because they've owned this series. 9 of the last 10 they've won. They're getting a couple of points here, too. Kansas is a 2.5 point favorite. Game's going to be played at Arrowhead Stadium. The Jayhawks killed me last week. One of my best plays, or one of my top plays, would have been the under in Kansas, West Virginia. That game had no business going over. If you saw, I think it was, 5-6 minutes left in that game, and Kansas was just cruising along. Nice, no sweat under, and all hell broke loose. Who do you have in this one, Phil?
Well, looking at Kansas this year, I had Illinois over Kansas, and they pulled the upset. I had UNLV over Kansas, and they pulled the upset. Last week, I had West Virginia over Kansas, and they got the win. But in each case, I had a sweat. I mean, you look at the UNLV game, it turned on an interception right before the half. The West Virginia game, as you mentioned, I'm down by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. West Virginia comes back and gets the win. So Kansas is playing good. Leipold's a tough coach to go against. Jalen Daniels has thrown 7 interceptions so far this year, and you got to think TCU has a way of doing that. And we talk, I started the show here with talking about defensive special teams touchdowns. Generally, if you give up 1, you're going to lose. If you give up 2, you're in deep trouble. Well, guess what? TCU gave up 3 to SMU. They actually had a 460 or 375-yard edge. They had a 24-23 first down edge. But if you give a team 3 touchdowns when their offense isn't on the field, then you're going to end up losing the game, which they did. They gave up 61 points, not necessarily all of the defense, although the defense didn't look great against UCF. So to me, this game's a toss-up. I could go either way. Once again, I'll throw it to you. Kyle, Tripp, when do you guys got a strong opinion here?
Not a strong one. Not a strong one.
No, not at all. These are, I don't know if Jekyll and Hyde is the best characterization. Maybe schizophrenic. I mean, these two teams. I mean, Kansas, what is it, Jeff Grimes, the OC? I mean, that's a guy that, I mean, if you're Jalen Daniels, it's like, well, what happened to my other guys? They got better jobs, right? They left. And now Grimes, who has struggled at his previous stops, look how that offense has affected the Kansas offense at this time. It's just not the same. It's gross. And TCU, I don't know. I mean, man, their fall from grace since being in the national championship just kind of proves that might have been fluky, or at least adds, more gasoline to that fire that people might be trying to stir up. So I stay away.
Go back to their national championship run. How many games did they win on the last play of the game?
Yeah.
3 seconds left in the game, completely outplayed somehow. It was miracle win after miracle win after miracle win. We saw that with the Minnesota Vikings a couple of years ago in the NFL. They had so many close wins, and they had, double-digit wins that year. And what happened the next year?
I still think I do think the under could still be a play here. I think Kansas, when all is said and done, is going to end up being a good under team this year, just because I feel like they were inflated a little bit on offense with the whole Jalen Daniels. He just hasn't looked as good this year. And then the defense, I think after a few fluky plays with the UNLV game, I think they're still okay on defense with a couple of really good corners in their secondary too. So
yeah, the under scares me with TCU, given what we got with them in UCF, a couple of weeks ago. We'll get to the Knights here in a moment. God was on TCU's side. That's what it was 2 years ago. We know God is on Colorado's side based on what they've been doing, and Colorado is visiting UCF, who is a 15-point favorite at home. 63 is the total, 3:30 on Fox. By the way, play-by-play guys, we're audio nerds. We're radio degenerates here of Learfield Ilk, Tripp and I. Make sure you have that Varsity Network app, because you can hear Brian Estridge, the voice of TCU, or Brian Haney, the voice of Kansas, as part of our College Football Blitz on Saturdays, as well as Mark Johnson of Colorado, who might have the most golden pipes of them all.
He really does.
That dude can call a football game. Mark Johnson. Check out the College Football Blitz for free by going to the Varsity Network app. It's college football audio version of the NFL Red Zone channel every Saturday, noon to midnight Eastern. Just search College Football Blitz on the Varsity Network app. It's on SiriusXM channel 84 too for most of the day from 12 on. So 15-point dogs are the Buffs here, Phil. UCF playing a first-time opponent for the 4th consecutive game. That's kind of odd. Knights off a bye after overcoming that 21-point deficit to win by 1 against TCU. KJ Jefferson completed 9 of his final 11 passes in that comeback. Knights only team nationally, Phil, that has rushed for at least 140 yards in each of its last 16 games. The miracle on Michigan was rekindled 30 years after the fact last week with Colorado. We won't relitigate that, Phil, but what side do you lean in here?
I'm going to go with UCF. I think it's a nice situational play. First of all, you look at the fact that UCF can definitely run the football, averaging 376 yards per game, 6.9 yards on the ground. They've got a quarterback in KJ Jefferson, who didn't look great right at the start of the year, but is getting better each week. But the thing I like best, they're off a bye. They're at home in Bright House. And meanwhile, Colorado is playing a 5th straight game, and they just played a big game against Nebraska, one where they were absolutely dominated in the first half. They trailed that thing 28-0. Nebraska clearly led up and in the second half. The Colorado State win is a rivalry game, and then you play Baylor last week, a miracle win in overtime. And now you've got to play a fifth straight week, go on the road and travel. I like UCF minus the points in this one.
North Carolina at Duke. It's the battle for the Liberty Bell, 4 o'clock ESPN2. Blue Devils, 2.5-point favorite at home. 56 is the total. Phil, you know I love my Blue Devils, but at home in a rivalry game as a favorite, fan deck galore. They're going to have Wallace Wade Stadium bouncing, if that's even possible, for the Tar Heels, who have their tail tucked between their legs following a 70-50 defeat. It was not that close, folks. What was it? 53 Tripp. You were in the blitz chair running the board.
It was a lot to a little. I remember that.
53-13 or something at halftime. I mean, goodness. 53-21. Goodness gracious. Embarrassing. Serious questions were being asked about Mac Brown. I think he retired and then unretired, at least according to reports, in a awkward post-game powwow with his team privately in the locker room. Duke is 4-0, though, Phil, under Manny Diaz. Victory bell has remained with the Tar Heels for 5 straight years. Last season, it went 2 OTs. UNC won 47-45. I got to stay away from this one.
Yeah, I'm going to start with North Carolina. I think they're going to bounce back off an ugly loss. As you mentioned, I think the players are going to go full out for Mac Brown this week and play hard. And, Duke naturally going to play hard. They're at home at 4-0. But I wasn't that impressed with last week's 45-17 game. Middle Tennessee basically gave them a lot. I think they had touchdown drives of like 2 yards, 1 yard, 7 yards. They only had 17 first downs for the game, 340 yards of offense. So I still think that North Carolina is the better team. They were the slight favorite prior to last week's results. Now they're the underdog. I think North Carolina travels well. They should have a good amount of fans there at the stadium. So add it all up. I'm going to take North Carolina plus the points. I think the value is clearly on their side this week.
Yeah, Tobacco Road rivalry, Gridiron Edition. Book it.
Number 1 Texas at home this week. They're laying a big number against Mississippi State, 38.5 for their SEC opener. Expecting to see Arch Manning again. They really just need to stay healthy and get by this week before they'll get a bye, and then they'll have Oklahoma on deck after that. Anything interesting to you here, Phil? I know it's a big number. You got an angle on this one?
Not really. Big number. Mississippi State is without their quarterback, Blake Shapen, and it'll be Michael Van Buren here. Mississippi State's offense has really struggled. They had 3 points at the half against Toledo. Last week, they were down 28-7 to Florida. And Texas, when they put their backups in, I would take Texas's second string over Mississippi State's first string. So that's a positive for leaning Texas, but really there's better games out there.
All right. Here's a game where the storylines have changed a little bit. I'm looking at my notes from Tuesday morning with Fresno at UNLV, and really good Mountain West matchup. Sluka can really make a lot of plays with his legs, and now everything's kind of been turned on its head because Sluka's no longer going to be the quarterback for UNLV over an NIL dispute. I think that game was 3.5.
I'm gonna take my headset off. There's a dispute here. I don't know if I'm gonna return. I'm just gonna quit on y'all.
That's good, Kyle.
Come on, Sluka. What are we doing?
Another 100,000, so he stays the rest of the broadcast.
Gosh, how about you put it in writing, dude? Okay, too much he said, she said type stuff. But this is what we've bit off.
This is what a lot of people have been asking for. I mean, you probably don't need to go too far down that hole. But no. I did see UNLV as a 3.5 point favorite. It's down to 1.5. What do you think about the whole situation, Phil? Do you have a play here?
Yeah, prior to the situation with Sluka, I definitely liked UNLV. I liked them by about a touchdown. You go back to last week's game, Fresno was outgained by 140 yards by New Mexico. That's a misleading final that they won by 17. And while they had been playing well this year, I think UNLV is a better team and at home. Now, I've been doing this a long time, and I have what I call the quarterback injury system, which is when a major player goes out on a team, what happens is 3 things generally happen. Number 1, the spread moves, which it did. And at one point, UNLV actually became a dog. The second thing is the backup quarterback or the backup that takes his place is not a massive step down. And we don't have that here. Isaac Malik Williams is a guy that had an equal amount of experience in the FCS as did Sluka. I think whatever quarterback you plug into that UNLV system will be successful. Remember last year, they had a guy in Jaden Malava who isn't even playing for USC this year. and opted to transfer. So I think there. And then the third thing is the entire team gives that extra notch because they're like, you know what? We're not one guy. We're a team. So I think we're going to see a unified effort by UNLV. And I liked UNLV prior, and even losing their starting quarterback, I still like UNLV here. And you get a little bit of value now. You don't even have to win by a field goal.
Yeah.
You cover this game.
UNLV 3-0 for the first time since 1984, receiving votes in the AP poll. They cracked the coaches poll, yet the starting quarterback has walked out on them over an NIL dispute, allegedly. And their running back, that an NC State running back, he announced later in the day, I think it was Wednesday, that he's going to utilize the redshirt year. We're seeing that. Mickey at Notre Dame utilizing the right. We're at that 4-game mark where these players can protect their remaining eligibility if they wish to jump in the portal. And then you got Bear Alexander at USC doing the same thing, who was one of the best defensive linemen in the entire country. I mean, it's hitting you from all angles. This is the state of college athletics and college football, and something we all need to be aware of, whatever we're wagering and however we're leaning on a particular day. Make sure you know the personnel and you know all the storylines, and that's why you're locked in to the Phil Steele Show. Modern Day Hate becomes the first ever Georgia Grown Bowl, Phil. Georgia Southern on the road at Georgia State. They haven't met that many times. I think it's the 13th overall meeting or 11th maybe. Panthers of Georgia State lead all time 6-4 over the Eagles of Georgia Southern, who won 44-27 in Statesboro last season. But they're going to call this the Georgia Grown Bowl, Phil, to showcase the state's leading industry, agriculture. The agriculture commissioner is going to present the winner with an inaugural presentation of the Commissioner's Cup, a symbol of the state's excellence in agriculture, education, and athletics. Georgia State's the home favorite, 3.5, 3:30 ESPNU. Who do you like?
You know, and coming into the season, I had Georgia Southern about a 10-point favorite in this game because when I went over the team with Coach Helton, he says this is by far the best team he's had. I thought they played a really good game against Boise. Remember, they led that thing in the fourth quarter. They went on the road and beat Nevada, and then they got beat by Mississippi, but who's not going to get whooped by Ole Miss this year? They're a really good team. Georgia State did upset Vanderbilt, but that was a rare role for Vandy as a away favorite. They also barely got past Chattanooga, and they caught Georgia Tech in a great situation, coming back from Ireland, playing on basically a short week, and still lost that game by 23 points. Their head coach took over after spring practice started this year, and we've seen many first-year head coaches struggle, especially versus coaches in their third year. So I still feel, even though if you can look at the power ratings would say Georgia State should probably be favored in this game. I think Georgia Southern's a better team. So I think the wrong team's favored. And I like the fact we're getting 3.5. We could even lose the game by a field goal and we still cover. I'm going to take Georgia Southern and win this one outright.
All right, moving on to the evening session. We've got Georgia at Alabama, a game that's a little bit of a big deal. And I think I see 7:30 as the start time. I'd be surprised if they even kick it off before 9, the way they'll try to milk this thing.
Yeah. Isn't that aggravating? It aggravates me.
Yeah. I know. That's kind of why I said it. But Kirby Smart, not that he needs any ammunition going into Tuscaloosa, but he's got some. They're 1-5 straight up against the Tide under Kirby Smart. They're coming off a bad performance at Kentucky. You build in a bye week. I can't imagine the words these Georgia players have had to hear over the last 2 weeks. And we know the Dogs, they're good off a loss. They're good off wins under 10 points. But this is one of those things. Last year, we saw what Jalen Milroe could do against a Georgia defense that's really good, but he's just got so much ability to make plays, keep plays alive. I don't have a strong play here. Phil, what side do you like?
Yeah, and Georgia also is playing with legitimate revenge. That loss to Alabama last year in the SEC championship game kept them out of the playoff. And I think if Georgia made the playoff last year, they would have won the national title because they were the best team in college football. So how do you go against Kirby Smart in Georgia? Well, I'm actually doing it this week. I'm actually leaning with Alabama. And here's why. Well, first of all, my computer has Alabama by double digits, which I had to slap it around. And I'm like, double digits? Get serious. But I think Georgia's got the better defense, especially better depth on defense. And as I mentioned, Alabama wasn't as impressive as a score against Wisconsin, but I just like their skill players better. You look at Ryan Williams, it gives them a legitimate wide receiver. I don't know if I see one on the Georgia side. Now, you look at the running backs. I like Miller and Haynes, very explosive. Yes, ETN solid, but I didn't like the way they ran the ball against Kentucky, and now they're going on the road against Alabama in a hostile setting. And then you look at the quarterbacks. Both are looking equally effective passing the ball, but Jalen Milroe gives you that running threat. So add it all up. The last time Alabama's been a home dog, 2007, been a long time. I'm going to go with the home team in this one, but not like my computer. I'm not calling for double digits. I'll say Bama by a field goal.
I'll be locked into that one on the drive home from Greenville on the Varsity Network app. You can listen to both radio sides. I'm going to the ECU game, Phil. They're playing UTSA. We're not going to get to that one. I don't feel good about any play on that particular game, but hopefully this hurricane, any potential flooding, can steer clear of everyone nationally, and they can avoid some catastrophic fate this weekend. But I know there's some concern at ECU about that game if there's so much rain in the Carolinas from Hurricane Helene that's coming through. So I'll be listening to that one, Phil. I'll also be listening, whether it's the Blitz or Brian Barnhart of the Illinois Radio Network. 19th ranked Illinois, no respect, much like Virginia Tech on the road at Miami. They're 19-point dogs. Maybe you can find it at 18. I think I'm seeing 18 right now for the Fighting Illini, who are undefeated. Brent Bielema has them off to their best start in his tenure, 4-0 for the first time since 2011, only the second time since 1951. Luke Altmaier, the only FBS passer with 10 touchdowns, no interceptions. Only the Illini and the Tennessee Volunteers with 2 top 25 wins. 7:30 on NBC. 48 is the total here, Phil.
Yeah, and I can lean with Illinois. If you watch last year's game, I thought Illinois played Penn State even up. Once again, it was a good play, bad play thing, about 50-50 for the game. In that game, Illinois had 20 first downs. Penn State had 20 first downs. What was the key? 5 turnovers. Altmaier was a turnover machine. This year, we have a different Luke Altmaier quarterback. Coach Bielema told me that in the spring, and a perfect 10-0 ratio. And if he doesn't turn it over, I like how Illinois' defense is playing under their second-year defensive coordinator. Fagan's looking good. I also have a tough time, though, going against Penn State at home. They take care of business as a home favorite. They take care of business as a big home favorite. And so I think it's going to be a good game, but I guess we can lean Illinois here.
Stanford really surprised me last week on Friday night. That was a really good win for them. Second time in 2 weeks, though, they'll be visiting the East Coast. They knocked off Syracuse as an 8.5-point road dog. Now they're going to Death Valley for the first time to visit Clemson. Much bigger dog this week. 21.5 is the spread right now with Clemson favored. And Clemson's really looked good since that opener against Georgia. Cade Klubnik just looks like a new quarterback right now. He's thrown for just under 600 in the last 2 games. Been really efficient, too. Is there anything stopping Clemson this week, Phil?
I don't think so. I think it's got a lot of things going for it. Stanford, the last 12 games against ranked teams, 0-12 ATS. I like that. I like the fact that Stanford traveled all the way to Syracuse, traveled all the way back to Palo Alto. Now they're traveling all the way back to Clemson. That's a tough trip. They're playing in Death Valley. And, as I mentioned, Clemson in the first half against App State, 56 points, 525 yards. In the first half against NC State, 45 points, 408 yards. They've unhooked those freshman receivers, and now the receiving core is dynamic to go with Phil Moffitt at running back. Cade Klubnik was one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school with the much improved receiving core. Remember, last year's receiving core is banged up. They lost their top 2 guys early in the year. Those guys are back. This is a different Clemson team. I'm going to go with Clemson. I'm going to lay the points here, and I look for them to have a big first half once again.
All right, we'll keep it in the ACC. You guys have probably noticed my victory mug this week. Florida State might be the only time I get to break it out this season, so I wanted to make sure I got it into the show. They got a much needed win over Cal last week. Phil, I don't know if you can check in your numbers or anything where that puts us in the playoff mix at this point. We can check on that later. Look, a win is a win, but that one just didn't inspire a lot, if we're being honest. The offense outside of the 1 passing touchdown looked about the same as it has all season. Just really a struggle on that side of the ball. On defense, it was nice to see Marvin Jones Jr. He made a couple of big plays coming down the stretch. We hadn't heard his name a lot going through the season, and I think the D-line as a whole just played their best game. But actually, SMU's defense is the unit that kind of has me worried for Florida State this week, just because They're not an elite defense, but they are good against the run. They're a top 25 defense against the run. That could spell trouble for, having to turn to DJU and the Florida State offense again.
What's the spread in this game, Tripp?
SMU by 6.
Okay. It seems legitimate, but SMU's been disappointing as well. Not a great game against Nevada. BYU, they lost to at home, and they got 3 defensive special teams plays against TCU. Got outgained by 105 yards. So I haven't been overwhelmed with SMU. And last week, Cal missed how many field goals? 2? They settled for 5, missed 2 of them. That's a pretty rough outing. Cal actually had the yardage edge, 410 to 284. So I have a tough time wagering on either of these 2 teams this week. I'm going to go with Tripp, our Florida State guy, to pick this one.
I hate to do it. I really feel like, on the theme we've had going all day of teams that we're going to be betting against a lot, I hate to say my Noles are probably falling into that category, but if I have a lean here, it probably is SMU at home.
Okay.
Phil, let's jump to the few remaining late-night games. Go a little chasing because there are some intriguing matchups. Big Pac-12 flavor, although we know that's really not the case. Although it could be in Wazoo's case as they visit number 25 Boise State, who is 7.5-point favorite, 65 the total, 10 o'clock on FS1. Tripp, I know that's your game, so I'm going to move to Arizona at 10th-ranked Utah. Utes are laying 11. There's also Oregon at UCLA, which is at 11 o'clock on Fox. 8th-ranked Ducks coming off a bye as 24-point favorites. Let's start with Arizona, though, because this seems like deja vu all over again from the last time we saw the Wildcats when they went on the road to the K-State Wildcats that Friday 2 weeks ago. It seems like the same sort of matchup, and I wasn't given a lot of optimism about Arizona. Can they cover the 11? Cam Rising, Isaac Wilson, does it matter? No. Kyle Whittingham, Muss, Rice Eccles at night, 10:15 on ESPN. I like Utah to cover the 11.
I'm going to agree with you on that, Kyle. You watch Isaac Wilson last week. He missed some passes, which could have gone for touchdowns. The one play, he had a receiver wide open over the middle, lead him. You've got an easy touchdown. They threw behind him. Money Parks made a great grab on it. But the one thing I liked about Isaac Wilson last week, he had 3 third and long runs where he got the first downs. And he's a freshman quarterback that's getting better by the week. That defense for Utah, wow. Oklahoma had 3 points and a little over 100 yards at home against them with 5 minutes to go. Put up 2 late touchdown drives. Now they're at home where they barely lose. I will compare it to the Kansas State game where Kansas State rolled in the second half. I think that Utah defense is legit. I'm going to go with Utah minus the points as well. And as you mentioned, I'm giving up on the whole Cam Rising thing. Will Cam Rising play? Will he not play? You know what? I'm anticipating Isaac Wilson's going to be our quarterback.
Yeah, Zona hasn't won in Salt Lake City in 10 years. Micah Bernard, Big 12 honors, running back of the week, as well as Isaac Wilson. First true freshman quarterback at Utah to beat an AP-ranked team. That's what he did last week on the road in Stillwater. Tripp?
Yeah, we should mention really quick the Washington State on the road at Boise State. Boise's laying 7.5. Hope you guys stayed up late last Friday night to watch the Cougs escape with an overtime win over San Jose, 54-52. What a game. The Cougs 4-0 on their way to the blue turf this week, 10 p.m. kick Saturday night. I'm not going to overthink this one too much. You've got Ashton Genty for Boise, who's just one of the best players in the country. You've got Mateer for Washington State, who can keep plays alive. He can hurt you through the air or with his feet. I actually like the over here. It's another high total, but 63.5. What do you have here, Phil?
Yeah, the over works for me. I also like Boise. I think when you look at Washington State's defense, and if we didn't go to the Phil Steele Plus at all, it's pure red. Which means they're giving up a lot of yards, a lot of points, 471 yards per game. They only have 5 sacks all year. Boise has got Genty at running back. They got Matson's playing extremely well at QB, blue turf, and they've impressed me all season long. They probably should have beaten Oregon on the road. This is the best group of 5 team, and I think they get Washington, an undefeated Washington State at home. But remember, Washington State was outgained by Texas Tech, trailed San Jose by 2 touchdowns. In the second half, I'm going to go with Boise minus the points, and I do like your overplay there.
Well, if you like that one, here's my top play of the week, Oregon minus 24. I just think they're a better team. They've turned the page. UCLA, talk about a team we're probably picking against a lot this year. I like Oregon. I think this is it's a big number, 24, but I like the Ducks to cover.
Good call. You go back to that second half against Oregon State. They had a 27-0 advantage. And even go back to that Idaho game. I know they only won the game by 10, but they had a 487, 217-yard edge. The offensive line looks like it's solidified. They had a bye prior to it to get it even more solidified. They've got the weapons on offense. And when Oregon is a large favorite, I think they're 6-1 against the spread as a 20-plus favorite against conference play. I like the Ducks here as well.
I think all the empty chairback seats covered by tarps would agree in Pasadena for that 11 o'clock start on Fox between the Ducks and UCLA. All right, the Phil Steele Show Guarantee. I'll get my plays. Tripp's already given his favorite. That's the Ducks as 24-point favorites on the road at UCLA. But, Phil, your 3 power plays. Now, you're guaranteeing a winning week in week 5. And if it's not a winning week, if you're not at least 2-1 following these 3 plays from Phil, he's going to give you inside the press box from the NFL. The NFL inside the press box for free week 4 of the NFL, meaning you'll have access to a $20 value for free on Sunday. Those picks went 2-1 last week with the Buffalo win and the under in Tampa Bay and Denver. It's amazing that one came through given the trajectory of that game on Sunday. The code word is PS Show. That's if you don't have a winning week via Phil's 3 power plays here.
And I tell you what I'll do. I'll throw something else on there. If we do have a winning week this week, which I expect, even if we go 3-0, I'll give you $10 off. So type that code in and you would get it for $10. So I would deliver you winners here. I'll still give you a discount. How's that sound on the NFL?
$10 off on the NFL. In addition to the free Sunday, then? Is that what we're talking?
We get the Sunday for free if we don't.
Gotcha.
But if we do win, you can still go to the website, type in the PS Show, and you take $10 off.
Got it. Love it. So just to be clear, if it's not a winning week, you get NFL Inside the Press Box, a $20 value for free week 4. That's this Sunday. Phil's going to unveil his 3 picks here. If you do have a winning week, which, of course, Phil and everyone and their mother expects us to have by taking Phil's advice on the following 3 picks, he's going to give you $10 off. It's only $10 for Sunday.
All right, let's get to those plays. We talked about Rutgers. I'm going Rutgers minus 2.5 over Washington. I went in depth there. Under the radar play, I like Marshall minus 3 over Western Michigan. Really impressed by Marshall last week against Ohio State. Once again, good plays, bad plays. They were even with Ohio State on the road. The same team that Ohio State blew out Western Michigan earlier. I like Marshall minus 3 over Western Michigan. And then I'm going to go with FIU plus the 3 over Louisiana Tech. The wrong team's favored here. Louisiana Tech's like 1-11 on the road. And FIU just a few weeks ago at home buried Central Michigan at home. I like Keon Lights Out Jenkins. I'm taking FIU plus 3. So your 3 plays, Rutgers plus 2.5, Marshall minus 3, FIU plus 3. Got to win at least 2 out of the 3 or you get press box for free in the NFL.
Scintillating stuff. I'm going with those Buckeyes. 3rd-ranked Ohio State to cover 23.5 at Michigan State. 7 o'clock game on Peacock. Buckeyes have won 42 straight against unranked teams. Sparty has lost 10 straight against AP top 5. And Ohio State has covered in their last 7 wins over the Spartans, over Michigan State. And Michigan State as an underdog has failed to cover in their last 7 against AP top 5 teams. So I'm going with Michigan State. It's also too rich. Virginia Tech and Illinois, both as heavy road underdogs. I'm going with each of them. I'm going against the heavy home favorites in Miami and Penn State, and give me the Hokies plus 19.5. Give me the Illini plus 18. And Tripp, you love Oregon, right?
I love Oregon. I think we should go head-to-head this week, Kyle. I like Oregon. I like Clemson. I like Iowa State. And I like UConn, too. We didn't get to that game this week, but I like UConn minus 6 against Buffalo, who's off a big win. A little bit of a letdown spot there. And if I beat you this week, or if you beat me this week, I'll pay that lady that hacked your Twitter account some money to try to get it back for you.
Yeah, make sure you're following Tripp Hurd at Locks of the Dock and Phil Steele 042 on Twitter. Do not look me up. Please do not. Phil, it's been great. We'll talk for week 6 next week. Again, the Phil Steele Guarantee, a winning week, and you get NFL Inside the Press Box for free week 4. That's this Sunday. So follow Phil's advice and the Phil Steele Show each and every Thursday on the Varsity Network channel on YouTube and, of course, College Sports Now. Phil, thanks so much.
Great talking football with you guys. Have a great weekend, guys.